So I've just attended this awesome workshop that has taught me a lot about who I really am rather than who I thought I was. For the last, let's see, I'm 55, 45 years or so, I have not thought very highly of myself, probably because of some experiences I had when I was a kid. My mother, through no real fault of her own, she was just doing what she needed to do at the time to take care of herself. Basically, well, she left us with a babysitter, and the babysitter turned us into the juvenile authorities, and we ended up in juvenile hall for a little while, and going from foster home to foster home, and had some really horrendous experiences that I can recall from that, and having feelings of being abandoned, and then some abuse involved in some of the foster care situations that are really kind of not fun to describe, so I won't go into that right now. But it didn't give me a very good self-image. And then later in life, I got involved in some things that were, kind of addictive behaviors to cope with, I suppose, the feelings of, low self-esteem or low self-worth or whatever. And I have been enslaved, I suppose you could say, for the last 44 years to an addiction that's just really held me in chains. And so, that and a number of other things that have happened in life, I was really in need of a new perspective, an entirely new perspective. And I went to this workshop, and I learned so much about the way we identify ourselves. We define ourselves by the things that happen to us when we're young, and by the things that we do to cope with the things that happen to us when we're young, that we lose sight of who we really are and our real purpose in life. And so as I went to these workshops, I learned again who I really am and what my purpose is in life. And one of the thing that really defines me, or that I resonate with in life, is illuminating significance. I love to understand things. I analyze things. I think about things all the time, and I love to be able to bring light to something that maybe a lot of people don't think about. And one of the things that has recurred in my life in terms of something that I have always kind of wanted the answer to is kind of a big question, and you've probably asked yourself this question, if you're at all like I am, a number of times, and like me, you probably just sort of laughed it off because it just seemed like too big a question, and there was no obvious answer. And the question is, what is the meaning of life? Well, through the years, I became a believer at a certain point in time, even though I was still living a fairly defeated life, but I believe at least when I became a believer, I believed I was a saved sinner, so that was better than the way it was before. But one of the things I learned was that God is love. And so I figured, okay, now that I'm getting closer to understanding what the meaning of life is. If God is love, there must be something about that has to do with the meaning of life. But then I wondered, okay, but if God is love, and that has something to do with the meaning of life, what is all this sin and evil that this world has to offer? That's not good. That's having to do with love. And I realized that the reason that is the case is because in order for God to give us the ability to love Him in return, He also had to give us the freedom to choose not to love Him. And in fact, that's what Adam and Eve did. Eve, by believing the serpent, and taking from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God said not to do, made the decision not to trust God, but to trust the serpent. And Satan, the serpent, his idea of the meaning of life was to have absolute freedom. Well, the problem with absolute freedom is that it is out of harmony with love, because if you have absolute freedom, then there's the possibility that you will choose not to love. And to choose not to love is to eventually destroy ourselves, which is exactly what we're doing in this world. And so that's, I think, what God wanted to show us by allowing sin to be in the world, is that if sin were to go unchecked, that we would indeed eventually destroy ourselves. So God wants us to have freedom, but only as it relates to love, and only as it's motivated by love. So Satan's idea, or Lucifer if you want to put it that way, because that's how he started out when iniquity was found in his heart, his idea was that God's government was not fair because we didn't have absolute freedom. Well, anyway, so in my search for the answer to what the meaning of life is, I noticed some interesting lyrics of different songs. There was a song I used to listen to by Nat King Cole called Nature Boy, and in the end of the song, basically what the boy said was that the answer to life's question is just to love and be loved in return. And that resonated with my heart. I thought, that makes sense, and that was even before I became a believer. So I didn't really put it together with that being the meaning of life, but as I thought back on it, that made good sense. And then I heard John Lennon's song "The Word Is Love" from the Rubber Soul album, and so that's interesting that he come to that conclusion, and then he later wrote the word "All You Need Is Love." And then I also remember Cat Stevens' song from the Catch Bullet 4 album about the little boy with the moon and star on his head, and all he said was love. So there were 4 songs there that basically said the answer to life's biggest question was love. So when getting back to this workshop I went to, and found out that the true me had nothing to do with the sin and the bad things that happened to me and the things I did to cope with it. It had to do with who God created me to be, and that's who my true self is. And I noticed in every process that I went through, that where I was searching for the answer to a very serious question, like what is my identity and what is my true purpose in life, whatever it was that touched a chord in me that evoked an emotional response was what resonated and what was a defining moment for me. And so, emotions are sort of associated with love. And another thing I noticed about the True You workshop is that all of us participants, we got to know things about each other that probably nobody else or very few other people knew. We actually got to know the worst there was to know about each one of us, because during the processes, those are the kind of things you talk about, the things that made you feel shame, and as part of the process of figuring out what it is that's obscuring your ability to see your true identity. So we all learned some of the worst things there was to know about each other, and yet that didn't cause us to have anything but more love for each other. And so I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So you can know the worst there is to know about somebody, and others can know the worst there is to know about me. And all that does is create the possibility for more and deeper love. I got to know 20 other people on a more intimate level than I've ever known pretty much anybody, even people in my own family. And that was over just a couple of 3-day weekends. And so I'm saying to myself, that really resonates with me. That really codifies my understanding of what the meaning of life is. The meaning of life really is that God is love, and that He created us so that He would have someone else to love, and that we could love each other and Him in return. So the meaning of life is to love and to be loved in return.